Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Alabi.
And I'm IBUCHUKWU.
I'm Veronica Zaka. Civil society groups in Nigeria were considered extremely vocal and highly assertive during the last administration. Now, these groups easily took positions on issues like payment of petrol subsidy, the Chibok girls' abduction, neglect of infrastructure, and amnesty for militants in the Niger Delta. There are those who believe that these civil society groups helped clear the way for the major opposition party to gain power in 2015. However, questions are now being asked as to why there is no such robust engagement with the government in the interest of the masses. To help us keep track of this, we are now being joined by IBUCHUKWU EZIKE, Executive Director of the Human Rights Watchdog.
Once again, thank you and welcome to the show.
Good morning, welcome.
What is happening to the voices of the civil society in Nigeria? Like we said before, in 4 or 5 years ago, it was loud and clear. In the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of criticism that we have not heard civil society voices. What do you say to that?
Well, I was saying that prior to the emergence of core civil society organizations or community in Nigeria in the 80s, late 80s, CLO was founded on October 15, 1987. Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, CDHR, followed in 1989. And then a couple of other civil society movements began to spring up. But before this time, the working class movements, the labor movements, the mass media, the church, the mosque, and professional organizations like the Nigerian Medical Association, Academic Staff Union of University, SASU, the student movement, the National Association of Nigerian Students, we are the core organizations that were mobilizing the people and protecting the interests of the citizens. So, but when the CLO emerged and CDHR and a couple of others, there was a movement, radical movement from where these organizations were operating to where we are. And people started, these organizations started talking about human rights of the citizens, the protection of the rights of the people, talking about, violation of women's rights, children's rights, workers' rights, and so on and so forth. Like this extrajudicial killings that we are talking about. Yeah. CLO has a project called Police Reform Project, that was dealing with such issues. And later we had we have the Penal Reform Project,
yes,
talking about the prisons and all that. And we had, labor rights and all that. So at that time, there was a military dictatorship. And it was easy for the international community to come in because they wanted to make Nigeria a civil society, or a civil community, so that they will also come in and begin to partner with the government of Nigeria. Yes. The military regime was a pariah, and the international community was not working with it. So they were using us, working with us to ensure that the military dictatorship was sent out of the corridors of power.
Yes.
And we did it in 1999. And during this period, after this period, the international community began to relate with the civil government. And so the resources that were coming to the civil society organizations became meager. And all the activities we were doing were no longer having resources to do that. And here in Nigeria, the government and the people, rich organizations, wealthy individuals, were not interested in civil rights activism. So they see us as people who are, meddling into their affairs that did not concern us. And some of them, the poor people that were working for, didn't have the resources. So the money we had to work for the people became no longer big for us to cover, all these areas that we are covering. So, but what caused the major thing was that in 2009, the Civil Liberties Organization office was sealed unlawfully by the police for over 1 year. I have a court order here. We went to court after our office was sealed, and demanded that our office should be, the police should vacate our office and that they should return all the things they stole away from our office. There was no court order. You know, it was just an extrajudicial, sort of...
a witch hunt?
Yes, coming into our office without an order of the court. So it was criminal, it was lawless. So we went to court to interpret the action of the police. And the Federal High Court here, presided over by the Honorable Justice Charles Achibong, now retired. You know, so he gave us this verdict, and the police did not go on appeal to vitiate the order of the court. As we speak, this order has not been implemented. So it's not like we are just keeping quiet. So when your office is sealed, and when the materials, the facilities you are working with are no longer with you, how do you work? We have written to the National Assembly, we have written to the federal government, we have written to the Police Service Commission, we have addressed media on this issue. And as we speak, this order has not been implemented.
What did they constitute as unlawful activities at the point?
There was no, I said, if you want to search somebody's house, you must first of all obtain an order of the court. The police did not obtain any order, and that was why the action of the police was declared unlawful, unconstitutional, and criminal. You know, so, but the police refused to go on appeal, nor did they implement the order of the court, because they have the guns. So the excessiveness of the police and the security agencies in Nigeria has been supported by the political class, because these are the people who must ask the police and all agents of repression to respect the order of the court. So what is happening to Nigeria has happened to the CLO, and nobody is coming to our rescue.
So when was this?
In 2010, this order was, our office was sealed on August 12th, 2009. And after a year, because we were waiting, because they said they alleged corruption. And you say, okay, go and investigate us. For 1 year, there was not even a report, you know, saying this thing is true, this thing is not true. And after 1 year, we went to court and said, even if we were, to be accused of fighting against ourselves, we have given them enough time. And there was no report as we speak. So, and we went to court, following due process of court, judicial process. And the court awarded us victory. And they refused. Our property, our facilities are still with the police, Odicom. They are still with our 25 million naira, which the court awarded us. I was detained overnight. I was awarded 250,000. I have not been paid. So when people are talking about the civil society keeping silence, when the civilian administration are doing worse than even the military dictatorship that we fought against. And some of us are beginning to ask, why did we fight against the military? Because there's no difference between what the military did and what the civilians are doing today. Corruption has become monumental. Abuse of due process of rule of law, abuse of human rights, that we have been discussing before we began to discuss this program, is everywhere. So when you act, nobody's coming to your rescue. So all of us have become victims, and we don't have the guns. We are just ordinary human beings, anchoring on our activities on the rule of law. But when you don't respect the rule of law, you don't respect the court, you don't respect the judges, judicial officers. So how do you? In fact, this Achibong who was retired, we have been following his activities. He's a human rights judge. Because these people will bring alleged corrupt persons before the court. And the man will say, don't bring people and keep them perpetually in prisons. These are human beings. So if you have your facts, let's go ahead. And they were delayed because they were senior lawyers and all that. And he was no longer continuing those things. And they ganged against him and said he was corrupt. What is the essence of corruption? Did he take 1 kobo from us? Did he ask us for anything? If the man was corrupt, he could have supported the police and not the CLO. Of course.
So tell us a little bit, tell us a little bit about what happens now. Since your office has been sealed, how has CLO continued to do its work, and what work are you doing? Because you...
Well, CLO is not an NGI or NGF. So we are a mass-based organization. We're all over the place. As I'm here and I'm talking, I don't need an office to operate.
Yes.
We can mobilize. We have members across the 30 states and Abuja, branches all over. So we continue to talk. But then you must have a place where you reach us.
Yes.
We must have to interface with the international community, the donor agencies, and so on and so forth. Yes. But if you want to do so, you must have an office where people must come to meet with you. We don't. And the government is keeping silent because they are benefiting from what they have done to us. These are people we condemn what they do because they are the people who repress and oppress the rights of the citizens. They are the people who perpetuate corruption. They are the people who use extrajudicial means to deal with the people in Nigeria. And so our silence is a credit, is an advantage to them.
So in a situation like this, because I mean, it sounds, first of all, as a citizen, I am already disheartened because the CFOs are the ones that are meant to be fighting. You are the voice of the citizens. And when you are in a situation like this, like you rightfully said, where do you go from here when the people that you've been fighting for, which are the citizens, and to give voice to, from military rule to now be the civilian rule, is the same power that is now backfiring and attacking you? Where do we go from here?
Well, we cannot relent in doing the work. If we were to be intimidated, we wouldn't have been having organizations like CLO and so on and so forth. But we are indigenous, we are citizens, we live in this country, we wear the shoes, and we know where the shoes pinch. So we cannot run away from it. When people were talking about the silence, when this madness of judicial impunity, became in Nigeria, we wrote to most of the diplomatic institutions in Nigeria and overseas, and telling them to look, you have to come in to intervene in this thing, because when there's confusion in Nigeria, the whole world will not contain the population that will implode. Yes. And so there's need for you to come in and arrest this thing. Dasuki was given bail, they refused to release him. EZIKE was given bail, they refused. The pro-Biafran groups led by, they refused to release them. And you have seen the issue, what was done to CLO. Up to today, nothing has happened. Over 10 years today. So the impunity has been there. Yes. And because, there's nobody, we don't have the gun, we cannot fight them, with our guns. It is the instrumentality of the law that you use. But when you got...
But it seems, I was going to say, it seems as if the law is now failing us.
Yes,
in this situation. Don't you agree?
It was Fidel Castro who said that in a state of lawlessness, it is illegal to be law-abiding. In 1953, when Batista Fulgencio took over power illegally, sponsored by some interest, he was a 26-year-old lawyer, and he called his young men and women in the country and said, we don't have a faith in this country. There's no future if you don't do something now. And what they did was to embark on revolutionary activities. From 1953 to 1959, when they took over the place, Havana, and formed government. And from that period to today, they have been in power. Yes. So it is the youth. I was a financial secretary of the National Association of Nigerian Students in 1990s. In those days, you cannot impose arbitrary fees in these campuses. You cannot expel a student without the due process of the rule of law, and you cannot intimidate people. We will come out. We were moving from one university to the other, intervening on the affairs of the students. What is NAS doing today? Where is it now? Where is the National Association of Nigerian Students? You see them in PDP rallies. You see them in APC rallies. They are hobnobbing with the politicians, who are the people who are oppressing the people. So in our days, it was even an anathema. It was an abomination for you to relate with a military officer or a government officer. Today, it has become different. Well, if you say it's a civilian administration and you can work with them, but you cannot, let go the welfare of the people, the welfare of your members. What is the labor movement? In 1945, there was a workers' strike led by Mike Imodu. It was what sensitized the pro-independence struggle and mobilized Nigerian people. By 1960, there was independence. It hastened the struggle for independence. Yes. So what are we having with the labor movement today? What are they doing? Even to work for themselves is a problem. You see people who are retired, they are not paid their gratuities, they are not paid their pension, they write to us every day, but they have a movement. So what is the movement doing?
Wow. Right. I know that you...
The church and the mosque even, what are they doing?
All right, so you rightly mentioned that the CLO cannot be kept quiet, even though you're
not keeping quiet. That's why I'm here.
Quiet. So my question to you now, I know that you mentioned that you had the police reform project earlier. I'd like to know what you guys are doing with this malaise of, trigger-happy policemen, you know, with the recent killing of Kolade Johnson and Ada Ifeanyi. I'd like to know what you guys are doing with this, because I know that we've had a few people come here to talk about this, the NSARS movement and all of that. So I'd like to hear what you guys are doing with this whole.
I've told you that we are Armstrong.
Regardless
today.
whether or not
because in the past,
Armstrong
there were two students that were killed in a place called Osuka in Enugu State. Two secondary school students, teenagers. We took up the matter to the High Court, and the court awarded 5 million naira to the parents of the students. CLO did it. There was no one kobo given to us. But the police have refused to pay the parents 5 million. Nor bring to book this policeman who did this thing. In fact, they smuggled the DPO, out of the office. Whether he's still in Nigeria, we don't know. The 15 police officers that were involved, that were convicted by court, we have not seen them. So there is this kind of, and we have done a lot of things in the past. You know, the Morocco is there.
Yes.
It was us.
Yes.
CLO started doing a lot of things. There was a detention camp in the sea, set up by the military dictatorship. We were the people that exposed it and brought it to limelight, and the place was closed down. There are a lot of things to have done. Well, we are feeling pained because the people and our associates and allies have decided from us. There's nothing one person can do. You may be shouting, coming to radio stations, televisions, in the newspapers and shouting. But it is not as good as when you work with a mass-based organization like the Civil Liberties Organization. No matter our problems, the donor agencies and the people must come to us, because we are the people that will talk. We are the people that march on the street. You remember Chimubani, late Comrade Chimubani. You see Beko Ramson Kuti. So most of our best brains have been eliminated.
I want to talk to you about something you brought up, which is when you were a student, the student movement. You've talked about different movements. You've talked about the movement led by Beko Ransom Kuti. When you look at the movement of the Occupy Ojota, which was basically sort of anti-forced subsidy movement during the last administration, in 2009, I think this was
Jonathan's
administration. And you look at what is currently happening and sort of this, there's really been a very quiet civil society. But when you look at what's happening in other countries around the continent, you look at what's happening in Algeria, you look at what's happening in Sudan, and Sudan being one of the countries where people really did not expect this. We also saw the Arab Spring a few 4 or 5 years, 6 years ago. Do you think that Nigerians' voices have been suppressed enough that we can't see a revolution, or do you think that there's a revolution brewing, and what role is CLO going to play in that?
Well, if we are planning, because it has been a long time that this didn't happen, and we are beginning to reorganize. So if we are having meetings, we are proposing meetings too. We have had several meetings before this year, and we are proposing new meetings. And the essence of all this is that since we are, kept in this condition by the police and the government of the day, Nigerians are suffering. So we must come out to begin to do something. We need to go out to the donor agencies, our partners, to people who are in this country. Because, you see, if the leader is in trouble, the rest of the people will be in trouble. CLO is in trouble, and the rest of us are in trouble. And because of the poverty, that the government had unleashed on the people, some of the donor agents, in those days you used to have programs being run by different civil society organizations. We're no longer having them today. Because the donor agencies and some of the supporters of the civil society movements in Nigeria are rightly working with the government that are also stealing people's money, and not using the money that God has given us freely to do something for us. So they are giving them money. So we need to talk to the donor agencies and to all these allies so that they will begin
I want to focus on, I actually want us to come, I just want to take a quick break and come back and talk more about the donor agencies and actually what's happening globally, and if that also is a distraction for the donor agencies. But let's hold that thought. When we come right back from this break, we'll do that. We're going to go on another short break. When we come back, we're going to pick up where we left off, which is talking about what happens to the millions of young Nigerians, and is there a revolution on the heels of the Nigerian people? We'll be right back. So welcome back. We're going to jump right back in, which is to talk to you more about there seems to be, you started this conversation actually talking about resources and funding, and there seems to be donor fatigue. One of the things I wanted to pick up with you on donor fatigue is, do you think that with the different war fronts that donors are looking after, so you have a huge crisis with the Rohingyas with the Rohingya refugees, you have a huge refugee crisis even in Nigeria up north. You have huge refugee crisis in Damascus, in Syria, in Afghanistan. Do you think that donors are so distracted with these human crisis that they're not able to actually have time for civil society? Or do you think that, what is going on with funding, and why is there a lack of funding? And how does that also play out in a place like Nigeria?
Yeah, the activities, human rights issues going on in these countries or places you have mentioned has nothing to do with what is happening in Nigeria. Every donor agency or agencies will have their own focus where they work. And they also have their own interest. If, for instance, the donor agencies in Nigeria have mapped out funding for civil society organizations, and they are giving money to the government, the interest is now more on the government than on the civil society. Because apart from the fact that CLO has issues, what about other organizations? Do you hear organizations holding conferences, holding programs, again, as they used to do in the past? It is because these donor agencies, organizations have, looked the other way. But you see them organizing programs with the government. And these are the people who are repressing the people. So you cannot be, the money that, Nigeria is not a poor country, for us to say it. We are one of the richest countries in the world.
We've had economists come on here and
Which economists?
But I don't want you to miss what we're talking about.
Yeah, so
one of the things I wanted to also bring up is that there are some organizations that are doing things. We had someone here from Sharap, and I think they're basically going they've been consistently appealing to the Senate president to stop paying one of the senators' salaries who is actually currently in holding. Have you guys looked at that, or is this some of the stuff that you're also... what about the other organizations? What are they doing and how are they raising their voices?
The donor fatigue is there. That is the major thing. You have few organizations that are funded. And moreover, these organizations are non-governmental individuals. There's nothing they can do. If the labor movement, like the Ojota thing you talked about, how did it come about? It was the mass-based organizations with the labor movement. We are the people that organized it. The workers were there. And the way we planned it, the Joint Action Front, JAF, planned it in a way that we will be there and consistently state we achieved what we wanted. But there were people or organizations who wanted to make names. They ran to those places. And after on Friday, they said they were going on weekend. That was when the military, the soldiers and policemen took over the place, and they never came back. Because if you don't have the originality of a project, you don't go and steal it, because you fail by the wayside. Those people fell by the wayside because they didn't have the original. They just heard that we were planning to do something, and they went to Ojota and stayed. What we were doing was moving from all the parts of Lagos, sensitizing the people, so that the people will be abreast of what we plan to do. And by the time we retire to Ojota, we'll stay there finally until the government listened to what we are demanding. But those people went to the first day and got the media to focus on them. After that 1 week, they became weak. So these are bourgeois elements in the civil society movement and all that.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that are you getting any inspiration, or are you feeling encouraged by the civil service in places like Sudan and how they've been able to stay steadfast? They're negotiating. It's a dialogue between them and the government. They've gotten the president pushed out, the representative.
Omar Bashir.
Yes, Omar Bashir pushed out. They've gotten the first person that was appointed also pushed out as well. Is that encouraging? Do you think that Nigerians are learning lessons?
We did it before them.
But we haven't done it any. So I want to talk about
the military. Were there. Do you think that the military left the corridors of power by their own volition? We forced them out of power. I've been detained for 23 times.
23?
23 times, right from the time I was in the university. I was expelled from the University of Port Harcourt. Olusegun's eye was blinded. Gani was continuously being detained until he died. Femi Falana, Beko Ransom Kuti, and so on and so forth. So we are not learning from anybody, we are learning from us.
Well, can we say more? Let me rephrase.
But sometimes you can always relearn.
Yeah, I was going to say, can the new generation, can the youth, because really in the direction for which our country is going, it is the youth. And your civil society is meant to be the voice of the youth, and I mean of the citizens, and communicate our importance as well going forward. So more so, can we learn? And how can we move forward? Because a few weeks ago, there was a rally where the youth were being organized to come out and speak and let their voices be heard. And from the response that we saw, even on Twitter, it was really poor. A lot of the youth did not come out. They did not support. They did not encourage. And like you rightfully said, if donorship is not supporting you and the law is not working to your effect, how do you begin to engage the youth of Nigeria, which are the future leaders, to mobilize like you did when you were in the university? How do we do that?
This is a very wonderful question you have asked. But are the youth willing to learn? When we were elected at the University of Calabar in 1991 as leaders of NANS, do you know who we met? The first place, the first post of calls for us, Gani Fahemi, Pekoran Sokuti, Olusegun, Civil Liberties Organization, CDHR, Nigerian Academic Staff Union of Universities, and so on and so forth. These other ones have been elected at Eagle Square. How did you raise money as a student leader to go and organize it at a place where political parties and governments are organizing activities? The campuses were our own domain.
Okay.
We were being elected on the campuses. You know, we protected the interests of the students, the welfare of the students. The detention that we suffered was not, the expulsions was not because we were acting on primordial issues. It was because of the interests of the people. In fact, in 1992, when this ASU thing they are talking about, the ASU agreement, was signed in 1992, it was because of our own struggle. When Dr. Jega, now Professor Jega, was the ASU chairman, they met, and we saw that the highest paid professor in Nigeria then was earning 1,500. Which was not up to what the least paid professor in Mozambique, in Botswana, and in Lesotho were earning. So we said some of us will graduate to become lecturers.
Exactly.
And so is this the kind of thing we are going to face? You go to an office of a professor, it's suffocating. With the dirty collar and all that, because there's no fan, there's no AC. And you say, no, this thing must stop. And you come to the hostels, the students were living like animals. So we said we were going to work with the ASU to ensure that this agreement was signed and things begin to change. You recall that if you had known that the Babangida administration went to A and said ASU should go back to class in the interest of the students. And we went to A and said, you should do what ASU is demanding in the interest of the people. So we stood with them, and until that agreement was signed, I was in the final year, 1992. That was my final year. So we worked to ensure that even in the interest of our own degrees, our own personal issues, we sacrifice it for the interest of the people. Today, look at how lecturers are driving, where they are living. It is our own struggle. Some of us are professors now in the university. Some are lecturers. They are benefiting from that struggle we fought.
So how do we continue? How do we continue?
How we continue? You see, this generation will tell you that they know more than you. They go to the internet and they think that that's where you learn. Have they heard about Karmas, a man called Karmas? Even those of them who are studying social sciences and history. Have they studied about VI Lenin and what he did in Russia? Have they studied about Fidel Castro, about Muammar Gaddafi, Malcolm X?
And why not? What do you?
No, because the interest is now on social media and all that. And they think that when they post all those things in the media, they are doing something.
Well, I think that the interest is, what we're saying more is that with this next generation, we are more visual through using the means of social media to get our voices heard. Most people do not believe in the violent or face-to-face attacks. But we are seeing that, like Mrs. Alabi rightfully said, in countries like Sudan, where the people are gathering together and allowing their voices to be heard in peaceful demonstrations. We know Nigeria is a country where there is a lot of violence and corruption. So in a situation where you might feel, could we be the next target? We're talking about guns on the streets with the police officers not rightfully being trained to use them. So that you can understand that even at the end of the day, where in your time, in your situation where you are more vocal, nowadays the youth might be a little bit more intimidated by fear of the situation that could possibly lead to violence.
No, it's not intimidated. They are not intimidated by anything.
So what do you
it's
think
because
it is?
they have lost focus.
Okay.
I told you that when we elected, Kani wasn't a violent man.
Mm-hmm.
Beko wasn't a violent man. CLO wasn't a violent organization. They don't come to these places again. They go to Asorok. You know that government now funds the election of NANS. They determine who becomes the president of NLC and most of the labor movements. In our time, you don't. It was an anathema for police people, for security agencies to even enter the campuses. You recall the Abisoye panel of 1986, after the mayhem in ABU, when students were killed, raped, and all that. And then there was a panel, Abisoye panel. And the students presented, can these students now present such a landmark report before such a panel? We made a representation, our representatives, that caused the government to enact this thing that police and soldiers can no longer go to the campuses.
Yes.
But the vice chancellors are now inviting SARS and all that to kill students, and nothing happens.
Comrade,
In our time, it can't happen.
Yeah. Comrade, I want to bring this conversation to a place where maybe we can give some hope to the voices that are out there. Civil society, what work CLO can be doing, what work can civil societies be doing. And really, in looking at the activities that we've seen through the Arab Spring, in Algeria recently, and in Sudan, what can we expect? I mean, as this administration begins its second mandate, what can we expect to see, and what should we expect to see? If you could just give the people out there something, because you've been very hard on us. So I just want us to understand what can be done. How do we reactivate civil society?
Yes.
Yeah, Kamal said it, that the philosophers are succeeded in describing the world in various ways. What is left is how to change it.
Exactly.
And that is where you have driven to now. I told you that CLO board has been meeting.
Yes.
In the penultimate 2019. And we are still meeting. It is not what Comrade EZIKE will stay here and say, this is what we shall do. It's going to be a collective decision because we are an organization run by due process, and it's not an organization that one man can come out and say, or one woman can come out and say, we're going to do this, we must do this. So by the time, I will want to assure you that by the time this new administration comes to,
Yes.
that there must be activities that must engage them.
Yes.
Because this country belongs to all of us.
Exactly.
I cannot face this kind of situations and allow my children to face them again.
Thank you.
So it is going to, because the president is a human being, has 2 eyes, 1 mouth, 2 legs, 2 hands, like all of us. For the fact that we have given him the country to hold in trust for us, doesn't mean that he can do anything. So that's why we are talking to international. I said we wrote 2 letters last year. And we have to thank the diplomatic institutions because the lot has worked. As one APC was making Nigeria ungovernable, and we wrote them and said, please call these people to order because there will be confusion, and this confusion will not contain the entire world. They listed. The second time was when the chairman of APC and the other senators were saying that when they resume, they were going to sack Saraki and the other leaders of them, whether by crook or by... And we said, you can't do that. This is a democratic society. If you want to remove them, you follow due process. You can't say, are you a military dictatorship? And we wrote to the international and said, look, see what we are hearing. And you have to call this man to order and his people. And we think, because of the composure, they called those people to order. And when these people resumed, we didn't have such a... And they have resumed, and now they are working. Nobody is harassing them again. So there are things we must do.
Yes.
Everything must not be by protest, because we're also growing. You know, those days we were doing all those things. We were young people. I wasn't married. Today I'm married with kids. I must be thinking of how those kids will go to school, how they will feed, where they will live and all that. In the same way with their own mates across the country. You know, but when the wars come to us, we're not afraid to lay our lives for the betterment of this society. Because some of us are convinced that the only way that this country can work is for us to match peace with peace. And if wars come to wars, force with force. You know, there's nobody who wants to die. You know, when Abacha was doing, I was in detention when Abacha died. I was lecturing handcuffed for 33 days. And I just got my wife to marry on Monday. On Wednesday, I was arrested. Wow. You know, so we have faced trials. That's the Mayegun Olusegun, Dion Sylvester, now a lecturer at LASU, senior lecturer there, Professor Dion Sylvester. He was thrown from a moving vehicle, and his leg was broken by security agents who followed him from the prison where he was released from the north, and threw him. So we have suffered. Olusegun's eye was blinded. Gani died because of the, the treatment they gave to him in all the places where he was detained. All the kind of gaseous elements they were throwing at us. You know, so we have suffered, and the suffering we were, undergoing then was for betterment of this country. So that as we are one of the best blessed countries in the world, we can't have people who will go to bed without food. We cannot have children who can go to school. We were products of public schools. I hate private schools. I don't go to private schools. We were public primary school, public secondary school, public university. And we challenged our colleagues all over the world. Most of the brains from this country were the brains building, economies and institutions in other parts of the world, in America, in Europe, in Asia, and so on and so forth. So why can't we, our own government, get them here to begin to build our own society? For the fact that you are a president or a governor or a chairman of local government does not mean that you know it all. Exactly. You are just a manager who will bring people who know all these things together, and so that they will forge the way forward. You go to other countries, see what our people are doing. Imagine first in all they are doing. But we can't accommodate them here. So why? Why? Resources everywhere. The other time they discovered there were individuals are mining gold in Zamfara.
In Zamfara State, yes.
You know, look at the Kogi. When we were at the national conference in 2014, we looked at all the states. There's no committee in this country that say don't create more states. They are not viable. Who is not viable? There's no community in this country that God has not given what what will sustain it. So it is because of the indolence of the leaders of this country. They don't think, they don't act, they don't want to engage vibrant brains that will, bring fast together and begin to move this society forward. So we can't continue to live like that.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to have you on. We look forward to engaging you, and we look forward to the CLO's engagement going forward.
Definitely have you back on the show.